Before we dive in, let me ask you a question. Do you feel nervous when your life seems to be settling down? Or do you feel anxious? You might be reminiscing about the past and playing out scenarios in your head. Most people unknowingly start arguments or gossip on purpose to get out of their current situation and back to a place of comfort. It's common in relationships, work, and even hobbies. Sometimes, when things are going well, you end up creating difficulties for yourself by looking for problems that don't exist. This is the main reason why you keep living in the past. You absorb what happened to you into your subconscious and apply it to current and future situations. As a result, you end up experiencing the same things over and over again. There's a phenomenon here that prevents us from moving on from the past, and we're going to learn more about it today. Today we're going to learn more about what emotional addiction is, how it affects you, and what its effects are, and I'm going to give you some solutions. First, what exactly is emotional addiction? It's the urge to constantly experience an emotion, whether it's good or bad. It's the feeling that the emotion is actually part of you, part of your personality, and part of your overall makeup. So because you feel that this experience is actually a part of you, you want to relive it all the time. And the weird thing is that one part of you finds pleasure in repeating this sensation, but another part of you finds solace in reliving it. So have you ever wondered why you keep feeling sad when you look at yourself? Why do you get angry in the exact same situations? Why do you always find the same pleasures? Or why do you feel the same fears? The answer is because you've constantly felt these emotions in the past. And even when we get to the point where it makes sense to experience these emotions, our brains still try to create them. Being emotional is a state that is dependent on certain emotions, or more precisely, chemicals that are released in the brain when certain behaviors are triggered. These chemical responses to certain emotions provide our brain with a corresponding reward. So what is the brain's reward chemical? The answer is dopamine. So what exactly is dopamine? Dopamine is a neurohormone that motivates us to perform certain behaviors in order to feel pleasure. For example, when it comes to addictive emotions like desire, dopamine is released. When you have a lot of desire, you release a lot of dopamine, and the act of pursuing something becomes an addiction. Whether it's shopping, social media, pretense, attention, you're addicted to the behavior. The key here is that the primary driver of addiction is desire. And that desire releases dopamine in the brain, which drives the person to keep buying. As mentioned earlier, emotional addiction is the other side of the coin, and it involves not only happy emotions, but also negative ones. People can become addicted to the release of stress chemicals. If you've been through a lot of hardship and stressful situations, cortisol is released. But here's a curious fact. What happens when our lives start to improve? You'd think we'd feel good and happy, of course. But unfortunately, most people actually start to feel anxious. Because everything is going so well right now, you actually start to fear when something bad will happen. This truth may sound strange and unpleasant to you, but we instinctively start creating problems where there are none. That's because that's how we're programmed to survive in the first place. It's the same with people who start a new job. In their previous job, every day was toxic, like a boring, irritating chore. You leave that sucky place and arrive at your new office, which is now calm and cool. Common sense tells you that there should be nothing to complain about, nothing to worry about, and nothing to be annoyed about. But as anyone who's ever changed jobs knows, that it never does. Our instincts kick in and we start creating things to complain about, things to worry about, and things to be annoyed about. That's when the brain's chemicals start to fill up. Seeing this happen made me realize that individuals can become addicted to bad emotions to protect themselves from deeper, uncomfortable feelings. For example, someone who doesn't like to be sad may become addicted to expressing anger because feeling sad makes them feel weak. The anger addiction protects them from feeling sad, but it can end up alienating them from their loved ones, making them feel like no one likes them. Our bodies and minds learn to make crises and chaos their home. The surges of dopamine and cortisol produced in these situations become highly addictive to our brains. Subconsciously, we learn that we need intense emotions to feel alive, even if these emotions are bad or cause pain and discomfort. So what exactly are we learning here? It's a reliance on emotions. That's because emotions are how we've always viewed life. Think about the life you've lived. What emotional states do you usually feel as you go through life? We often look at the three-dimensional universe and the situations around us and react like this. If only that wasn't there. We say, "This is why I'm struggling." And we start blaming others instead of accepting responsibility for ourselves. I can control my thoughts. What happens around me is what happens to me today. What happened in the past stays in the past. It's just a previous version of yourself. It was a previous experience, and it's already over. You can't keep yourself in the past anymore. You have to break free. So how do I start thinking, and how do I start changing? How do I become more conscious of who I am? If you can become more aware of who you are, you won't let things keep happening to you. These are the concepts of different realities that influence which reality you turn into, the decisions you make, and the way you think. Imagine two people who look exactly the same and live exactly the same life. Both have had positive and unpleasant experiences. One person acknowledges that the negative exists, but focuses on the outcome they want and the good reality. The other person has experienced both positive and negative events, but focuses on and ruminates on the unpleasant things that happen to them. The person who ruminates about the negative becomes addicted to that emotion and begins to identify with it. So when they start to recognize that emotion, it becomes their identity. They start to relive that emotion over and over again, and they get pleasure from the release of dopamine. On the other hand, people who are really self-aware do this. They recognize that something negative is happening, but they focus on positive outcomes. They focus on things that will help them improve their thinking. They experience emotions, then detach and let go of them, and don't identify with them. This person has an overall better perception of reality. Over time, this improved perception of reality develops. It all comes down to habit, and it becomes second nature. In other words, habits are formed when repeated behavior becomes second nature. Developing emotional habits means automatically teaching yourself how to react emotionally to different situations. We can't control the emotions themselves, which come from outside ourselves. We can only choose whether to react negatively or positively to those feelings. Over time, these moods set the standard for how the self reacts to its environment. If anger is your default emotion, you might find yourself gravitating toward it in uncertain situations, or you might feel calm as it sweeps over you. Of all the emotions, anger is a really strong one. It's surprising that our reactions to that emotion can vary. For people with emotional habits, anger is a familiar emotion that can be used to calm someone down. And there's a lot of power in familiarity, another emotion. Let's take traveling abroad as an example. Imagine you're traveling abroad by yourself to a place you've never been before in your life. You have no acquaintances there, no familiar neighborhoods, and no familiar food. You walk down the street and start to get hungry. You look at pictures of food, pick a restaurant, and walk in. You order your food, using a translator, and as you wait, you see people from your hometown at the next table. You jump right into the conversation and say, "Oh, you're from LA, I'm from LA." You've never met these people. What's amazing is that you've never met these people before, except that you share the same hometown. You have no idea who these people are. They could be murderers, or they could be scammers. But there's a familiarity to the conversation that creates trust and comfort. They're just from the same village. You don't know these people, but just the idea that they're from the same town is comforting. The same goes for our emotions. According to another quote, we begin to rely on our emotions for the same reasons we rely on substances or behaviors. When we become overly dependent on an emotion for comfort, relaxation, release, reassurance, it can seem like an obsession, compulsion, or even an addiction. Most likely, your default emotion when faced with an unknown situation is fear. So you're familiar with fear. You may already be addicted to it. For example, when you're in a relationship, you may feel happy in the moment but fear that the other person will leave you. In the case of fitness, you might be afraid of falling while exercising or even coming to the gym because you're afraid of what others will think. It can also make you feel like you're not making any progress when you're working out. So this is a very important factor to consider, especially when you're meeting other people with any type of addiction. You need to look at the addiction, but you also need to look at the core cause of the addiction. For example, if someone is turning to drugs to escape from financial difficulties, the underlying reason may be financial difficulties, but the underlying emotion behind that may be stress. It could be that what people in financial difficulty really want to escape is tension, not anxiety. Believe it or not, it's not essential to react to the situation as a result. Let's take a closer look at the solutions that can actually help. I think you need to absorb all the solutions I'm about to share, so keep your ears open. Especially if it's a solution you've tried before, or have tried but haven't consistently implemented, you need to pay attention. Also, if you're going to do something, do it consistently, because the mind is much more complex than we give it credit for and the body is finicky. The brain wants comfort, it likes dopamine, and it has neurological pathways for certain habits. And the body actually gets used to certain feelings. If you want to make a real change in your emotional habits, you need to break this chain and do something new. The first is meditation. Meditation helps you be more present in the moment. It brings you back to the present moment, keeps you from dwelling on the past, and helps you avoid getting too far ahead of yourself. Slow down and think about your day. When you wake up in the morning, what's the first thing you do? Most of us start thinking about what we need to do right away. Then you start to associate your emotions with the actions you need to take. For example, let's say I need to drive my kids to soccer practice. Oh no, there's going to be a lot of traffic. I'll be late because people won't be able to drive. So you start worrying because you're thinking about the future and feeling the emotions associated with it. Meditation reduces this worry by more than 80% and helps you focus on the present. And you know what? When you meditate, when your brain starts thinking about what's going to happen later, you're not emotionally invested in it. When you're just being present, you don't get as much emotional impact. Even if you do feel a certain emotion, you're not going to get caught up in it. You won't connect with it. This is part of the power of meditation. Try yoga, where you stretch your body in a certain way to affect your mind. Breathing deeply and intentionally has a profound effect on the nervous system. Among them, yoga breathing is a technique that uses intentionally controlled breathing to calm the mind and create a sense of calm. It's amazing to realize that breathing has a direct impact on mental processes and bodily functions. Many people are overly tense, and the root of tension comes from unconscious worry. Do you have unconscious anxiety about what's going to happen tomorrow? Are you anxious about what's going to happen next in your life? When this happens, you need to relax your body as much as possible. When we can stretch, breathe deeply, and monitor our brain, we can relax. When the body is calm, the nervous system says, okay, everything is fine. In the brain, everything is fine. This is the power of spiritual practices like yoga and meditation. When your state of mind changes, it also affects the way your body, the nervous system, reacts to stimuli. Because you're able to feel a wider range of emotions, you're less prone to emotional addiction. It feels like you're experiencing these emotions as a human being, but it's not you. I realize that as a human being, I experience a range of emotions that come and go. So instead of reacting when someone else is sad or angry, I can stay focused and calm, stay in the present, and understand where those feelings are coming from. Even if you have a tendency to fight with others, you don't have to act aggressively, you can stay centered and present. You are no longer attached to your emotions. Our nervous system is the body's main communication network. Like wires, nerves carry messages throughout the body via electrical signals. So when you think about a stressful situation, your body starts to react quickly. The next step is to observe yourself from the perspective of your audience. There's a very interesting phenomenon that I've discovered over the years of transurfing. It is that reality is a game. In it, you are the protagonist, but you are not the main character. This may sound strange to you. I mean, you're the main character, but that's not who you are. You're in the position of the creator, who is watching you experience reality. Imagine that the movie you're watching is about you, and you're the audience watching it. And then think about going through your day. Watch yourself as an audience member when you exercise, when you go to work, when you interact with people, when you're anxious, when you're unhappy. When you're having these experiences, you're seeing yourself in the third person. You won't be as intensely involved in what you're doing, and you'll be able to distance yourself from your addictive emotions. When you step away from these emotions and start observing yourself as if you were playing a role in a movie, your life can feel lighter. Next, stay away from media and people who are full of movies. If you want to change your life, you can't be around people who reinforce old patterns. If you're used to watching dramas with lots of fighting and arguing, and you're used to hanging out with people who fight all the time, you're reinforcing that behavior in yourself. You're making it acceptable. That's a really important point to remember. So if you watch a lot of dramatic movies on TV or you watch the news all the time and there's a lot of unpleasant stuff, it can be a source of anxiety. It's not just the emotion. If you don't want that emotion to be normalized because it's been normalized, get rid of it. Then there's blanket judgment, criticism, and complaining. A lot of complaining means a lot of judgment, and all of that comes with emotion. The next step is to let go of expectations. Many of us have unrealistic expectations of ourselves and others. We apologize for having high expectations, but sometimes we need to play it cool because we can get angry when our expectations aren't met. You can get depressed. You can get irritated. It could be something very minor, or it could be that the other person has been exceeding your expectations for a long time. It's completely understandable. It's completely natural. But we can't allow ourselves to become emotionally addicted to it anymore. Although you are angry or upset in some way because you have had high expectations of the other person in the past and are used to them disappointing you, you need to recognize that everyone is different and you can't expect everyone to live up to your standards all the time. You have to find ways to fulfill your needs as best you can, and it's important to understand that. Next, reduce the activities that produce dopamine. This includes social media, pornography, sugar, and junk food. When you get a big dopamine rush, you start to crave these sensations constantly. You want to experience those feelings over and over again. And you'll engage in those behaviors over and over again. You're always conscious of desire and pleasure. The brain will find a way, so be very careful when looking for activities that release a lot of dopamine, which is associated with feelings of desire and pleasure. Next, think about what you're avoiding and why you're avoiding it. In particular, think deeply about what you're afraid of, what you've been afraid of in the past, and your worries, such as phobias, and think deeply about yourself. It's all about how you choose to act. Those choices add up to create your future. And the entire universe will help you, as long as you make better choices. Finally, don't get depressed. Being depressed is akin to ruminating. I can't believe you did this. I can't believe this person did this. I can't believe that person did that. I can't believe that person did that. I can't believe that person did that. And so on. They always moan and never change the subject. I once saw an interesting phrase about depression. When you ruminate about something that's bothering you, you rarely gain insight into the problem. You just replay the traumatic event in your mind, and you start acting out the situation in your mind. It's like if you had a fight with someone and after the fight is over, you replay the fight, thinking, "Oh, I should have said this or that." And you start to obsess over that thought, and you start to become addicted to the emotion. And when this starts to happen over and over again, it can continue to happen over time and you can hold grudges against people. That's what emotional addiction is. It's okay if you're having a hard time right now, it's just that you haven't decided to make the right choice yet. Think deeply about whether you're in an emotional addiction and be kind to yourself. Be grateful.